What if the most dangerous manipulation in your life isn't something someone did to you, but something you're now doing to yourself? What if the reason you feel uncertain, anxious, or slightly disconnected from your own memory isn't weakness, but that you are being conditioned by an outside force? Before we go anywhere near definitions, I want you to answer one question. Think about this. When was the last time you were absolutely certain about something you experienced and someone convinced you it never happened? That moment is where this begins. In 1944, a movie coined the term for a form of psychological abuse so subtle that its victims questioned their own sanity. It began with the dimming of a few gas lights. In the story, a husband manipulates the lights, causing them to flicker, and when his wife notices, he denies it, tells her she's imagining things. He insists the environment is stable and that her mind is the one that's unstable. This is where the term gaslighting originated. But today, this concept has been watered down into a meaningless buzzword used by people who don't understand the weapon they're describing. Clear your mind of the social media definitions. What we're discussing here isn't simple dishonesty. It's a precise, military-grade assault on your perception of reality. Most people think they're immune to manipulation. You likely believe you're too smart to be tricked because you trust your eyes, your memory, and the evidence right in front of you. But this technique doesn't attack your logic. It bypasses your logic entirely to attack your sensory baseline. The danger isn't that someone is lying to you. Lying is amateurish, easily detected. The danger is that your internal compass for detecting lies is being systematically recalibrated. The manipulator isn't trying to convince you that a lie is true. They're trying to convince you that your truth is a hallucination. Look at your life right now. You might feel a constant, low-level anxiety, a sense that the ground is shifting beneath your feet. You hesitate before speaking because you're no longer sure if your memory serves you. You might find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do. And none of this is accidental. Your confusion is manufactured. It's engineered by an outside force. The predator knows that if they can break your trust in your own senses, you'll have no choice but to rely on theirs. You become a passenger in your own life, navigating by a map someone else drew. We're going to expose the mechanics behind this psychological warfare. Tear down the curtain so you can see the gears turning. Once you understand how this weapon works, you'll realize it's been used against you for years. But after today, you'll never question your own sanity again. Most people make a fatal error when analyzing deception. They assume gaslighting is simply a fancy word for lying. This lazy thinking is exactly what allows the manipulation to take root. These are two entirely different mechanisms with two entirely different goals. A lie is a defensive maneuver, an attempt to deceive you about a specific fact. Let's imagine someone steals from you. They say they didn't do it. That's a shield used to avoid consequences. Gaslighting is not a shield. It's a weapon, an aggressive attempt to overwrite your hard drive of reality. The gaslighter doesn't just want you to believe a falsehood about a specific event. They want you to doubt that you ever experienced the event in the first place. They want to convince you that you're the one who's crazy for even bringing it up. The distinction lies in the target. Lying targets the facts of a specific event. Gaslighting targets your ability to interpret events at all, and this requires a specific power dynamic. The manipulator positions themselves as the sole arbiter of what's real and what's imagined. They appoint themselves judge, jury, and architect of your world. When you're being lied to, you still possess your autonomy. You can look for evidence, trust your gut. When you're being gaslighted, the goal is to make you surrender that autonomy completely. They want to replace your organic memory with their fabricated version. And it works. Not because you're stupid. It works because you are human. You're trying to use logic to fight a psychological virus. You're arguing about facts while they're dismantling your capacity to process facts. If you treat a gaslighter like a simple liar, you will lose. Every single time. You'll bring evidence to a court where they own the law. So stop looking at the specific deception and start looking at the pattern of erosion. Because once they control your perception, they don't need to lie to you anymore. You'll start lying to yourself for them. You're probably waiting for a moment of impact. You expect manipulation to look like a storm, a shouting match, a massive lie that shatters the room. That's the amateur's game. If you're looking for an explosion, you'll miss the threat entirely. True gaslighting is never a single event. It's the gradual erosion process. Water dripping on a stone. One drop is nothing. 10,000 drops cut a hole through solid rock. Most people never notice because the early stages are designed to be invisible. The predator doesn't start with abuse. They start with benevolence. They lower your defensive walls by disguising their attacks as concern. You look tired today. I'm only telling you this because I want you to be better. It feels like care. But it's the installation of a filter. They're training you to question your own state of mind before you question their behavior. And here's the mechanism that traps you. The manipulator moves the baseline of what's considered normal only millimeters at a time. If they moved at a mile, you'd revolt. You'd leave immediately. But a millimeter? You justify it. You tell yourself it's petty to argue over a tone of voice or a small misunderstanding. You think you're being the bigger person. In reality, you're being conditioned. They increase the frequency of contradictions slowly. Last month it happened once. This week, 3 times. Next month, it'll be your daily existence. You fail to notice the shift because you're watching the hour hand of a clock. Looks stationary to the naked eye. But give it time, and everything has changed position. Your certainty is being sanded away, layer by layer, until you're raw and exposed. Once the erosion has compromised your structural integrity, the manipulator makes their move. They stop targeting your current perception and go for something far more foundational. They reach back into your timeline to destabilize the one thing you think you own, your past. The erosion is only the softening of the ground. What follows is the tactical airstrike on your history, the destabilization of memory. You know what you saw. You remember the exact phrasing of the insult. You recall the specific sequence of events. The data is sitting right there in your mind. But when you bring it up, you're not met with a debate. You're slammed into a wall of toxic amnesia. This isn't them forgetting. This is them daring you to trust yourself. They don't shrug it off. They vehemently deny the event ever took place. They react with aggression or profound shock. They look at you with pity, shaking their head, asking if you've been sleeping enough. Joseph Stalin understood this principle on a civilizational scale. When he turned against an ally, he didn't just remove them from power, he removed them from history. Nikolai Yezhov, once the head of the Soviet secret police, was literally airbrushed out of official photographs after falling from favor. One day, Yezhov stood beside Stalin at a canal. The next day, the photograph showed Stalin standing alone. The message wasn't just political, it was psychological. If the state can erase a man from a photograph, it can erase anything. Your memory becomes negotiable. Your past becomes their property. The same mechanism operates in your personal life. When the manipulator denies your memory, they force a split in your mind. You're trapped between two terrifying conclusions. 1. This person you value is gaslighting you with cold-blooded malice. 2. Your cognitive faculties are breaking down, and your brain will almost always choose the second option. Why? Because the brain is a survival engine, not a truth engine. It would rather doubt itself than sever a vital connection. Accepting that the person you rely on is a predator means accepting that you're in immediate danger. That triggers too much stress, so your mind takes the path of least resistance. It decides that you're the broken one. Eventually, you stop referencing the past because the conflict is too painful. You surrender your history to keep the peace. And now you're stranded in a perpetual, confusing present, floating without an anchor. A person with no history has no foundation to stand on when the next wave hits. And the next wave doesn't just erase what happened, it replaces it. Nature abhors a vacuum. That's physics, but it's also the governing rule of your psychology. When the manipulator strips away your confidence and erodes your memory, they create a void. A terrifying empty space where your certainty used to live. Your brain can't handle this emptiness. It craves structure. It demands a narrative. And because the manipulator created the hole, they're the only ones standing there, ready to fill it. This is the reality vacuum. And the masters of this dark art don't leave the void empty. They fill it with what's known as the credible alternative narrative. They don't simply deny your reality. They reconstruct history to be more palatable, more logical, and safer than what you actually witnessed. They take the raw data, the time, the place, the raised voices, and rearrange the context. They don't say the fight didn't happen. They say the fight happened because you were tired, or because they were trying to protect you from bad news. Suddenly the abuse isn't abuse. It's a misunderstanding, a reaction to stress, a noble failure. Then they go further. They invent an external enemy to deflect blame. It wasn't their incompetence that caused the damage. It was the market, the vendor, the system. By introducing a third villain, they shift your scrutiny outward. You stop looking at the knife in their hand and start staring at the shadow they're pointing at. This works because it gives your brain a logical path to follow. The truth is messy, painful, senseless. The alternative narrative is clean. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And because you're a rational person, you gravitate toward the explanation that holds together, even if it's held together with poison. And once you accept that narrative, you become an active participant in your own deception. You start defending their version to your friends. He didn't mean it. He's just under a lot of pressure. You've taken the brick they handed you and used it to build the wall that keeps you trapped. You're no longer just the victim. You're the co-author of the fiction that's destroying you. Most people make the critical mistake of thinking gaslighting is a domestic crime, that it stays behind closed doors. It doesn't. Gaslighting scales. It climbs from the living room to the boardroom to the political stage, and at the institutional level, the mechanics become even more ruthless. The East German Stasi perfected this through a program called Zersetzung, decomposition. Rather than arrest dissidents and create martyrs, the Stasi would quietly enter their homes and move objects. They'd shift furniture by inches, change the time on clocks, remove a picture from the wall and replace it a week later. The targets weren't beaten or imprisoned. They were made to feel insane. Many checked themselves into psychiatric institutions voluntarily. The Stasi didn't need prison cells. The victims' own minds became the prison. This is the same mechanic operating today when institutions face scandal. They don't defend, they attack the source. They claim the footage is edited. They scream about context. They flood the zone with so much conflicting noise that the signal dies. Weaponized ambiguity deployed on a societal level. The goal is to make you question the very nature of evidence. And when you can't tell up from down, you stop moving. You freeze. The public gaslighter doesn't need your loyalty. They need your apathy. They want you to throw your hands up and say, "Who knows what's true anymore?" That sentence is your surrender. You let corruption continue because the mental cost of figuring it out is too high. They don't need to hide their crimes if they can exhaust your capacity to care about them. And this reveals the true endgame. Most people assume the manipulator wants you to believe a specific lie, to accept that black is white. That would be too simple. That would mean they care about the content of the argument. They don't. Their actual goal is far more sinister. They don't want you to believe X is Y. They want you to doubt that X even exists. When a manipulator floods your environment with contradictions, they're not trying to win a debate. They're inducing a state of high cognitive load. Your brain is a prediction machine. It maps reality so you can survive. When the map constantly changes, when affection turns to rage without warning, when facts are denied seconds after they happen, your neural circuitry overheats. You burn glucose at an accelerated rate, trying to find a pattern in the chaos. But there is no pattern. The randomness is the weapon. When the human mind is exhausted by confusion, it seeks the path of least resistance. It stops fighting for the truth and starts begging for stability. And the manipulator has been waiting for exactly this moment. They position themselves as the only source of clarity in the storm they created. They break your compass, then offer to lead you by the hand. Action requires certainty. To leave a relationship, to quit a job, to fight back, you must first be certain that you're right. By keeping you in perpetual fog, they neutralize your ability to act. You remain trapped not by physical force, but by the inability to decide what's real. You keep waiting for the confusion to settle before you make a move. You don't realize that the confusion is being maintained on purpose. Let's step out of the noise for a moment. Stripped to its core, self-trust is just mechanics. It's the alignment of perception and belief. Your eyes see an object. Your brain identifies it. Your gut tells you how to react. In a healthy mind, this is a straight line. Input matches output. You see fire, you register heat, you move your hand. That's survival. The manipulator doesn't attack your eyes. They attack the connection between what you see and what you believe. You see contempt on their face. You feel the coldness of their tone. But they tell you, with absolute conviction, that they're acting out of love. And this isn't just psychological, it's physical. When your senses detect a threat, but your conscious mind is forced to accept safety, you create a system error. This is the source of that chronic anxiety you feel. It's not a disorder. It's your internal alarm system stuck in the on position because the inputs are conflicting. Your body screams danger. Your mind is told safety. That friction is what burns you out, what makes you feel exhausted even when you've done nothing physical. You're fighting a war against your own nervous system. Think of it like a pilot flying through a storm. You're the pilot. Your instruments are your intuition. Gaslighting isn't the storm outside. It's someone reaching into the cockpit and recalibrating your altimeter to say you're climbing when you're actually nose-diving. If you crash, it's not because you forgot how to fly. It's because you're flying with corrupted data. Meanwhile, the manipulator watches you crumble, the shaking hands, the panic in your voice. And instead of backing down, They use your biology as evidence against you. They point at your trembling and say, "Look at how unstable you are. Look at how emotional you're getting." They frame your survival instinct as mental illness. And you believe them. You think the anxiety is proof you're broken. In reality, the anxiety is proof your systems are working exactly as they should. You're reacting to a genuine threat. Learn to trust the animal inside you more than the logic in your head. Logic can be twisted. Words can be redefined. Facts can be obscured. But the adrenaline spike, the cold sweat, that's raw data. That's truth trying to break through. If your gut says run, you're in the presence of a predator. But here's what most people miss. You probably believe your intelligence is a shield, that because you can analyze data and solve complex problems, you're immune to these distortions. That belief is the single most dangerous lie you tell yourself. High intelligence doesn't protect you from gaslighting. In many cases, it makes you the perfect target. This is the intelligence paradox. Smart people have a fatal flaw, a compulsive need for the world to make sense. When the manipulator acts in a way that's contradictory or cruel, you don't accept that they're simply being malicious. You fix it. You use your own processing power to bridge the logical gaps they leave behind. You tell yourself they must be stressed from work. Maybe projecting childhood trauma. Maybe they misunderstood your tone. You invent a complex, rational explanation for their irrational behavior. You're the one doing the heavy lifting. The manipulator throws out a jagged, broken piece of reality, and you're the one who sands down the edges until it fits the picture. They rely on your need for order to construct the false reality for them. You're effectively gaslighting yourself, because the alternative, that someone you trust is simply cruel without reason, is too chaotic for your intellect to accept. You connect dots that don't exist. You find patterns in noise because your brain is trained to find patterns. Your intelligence is a powerful engine. Feed it garbage data, and it processes that garbage faster and more convincingly than a slower mind ever could. Intelligence without intuition is a high-speed processor running the manipulator's corrupted software. You're using your best asset to dig your own grave. Once your senses have been severed from reality and your intellect has been turned against you, the final pillar falls. We're no longer talking about what you see or what you hear. We're talking about who you are. This is the total collapse. For months, maybe years, the manipulator has been handing you a script. They've called you unstable, jealous, incompetent, insane. A part of you fought back, held on to the truth. But psychological attrition grinds down the hardest stone. Eventually, the exhaustion becomes too heavy. You stop fighting the narrative. You begin to embody it. You look in the mirror and you no longer see the person you were before this started. You see the unstable wreck they described. This is learned helplessness in its purest form. In 1973, 4 hostages were held in a bank vault in Stockholm for 6 days. When police finally freed them, something disturbing happened. The hostages defended their captors, refused to testify against them. One reportedly became engaged to the man who held her at gunpoint. The psychiatrists who studied the case named it Stockholm Syndrome. But what they were really describing was the end point of total psychological capture, the moment a victim's identity has been so thoroughly overwritten that they can no longer tell the predator from the protector. That's the end game of gaslighting. You apologize for things you never did, not to smooth things over, but because you genuinely believe you must be at fault. You act out the role of the villain in your own life, because it's the only role available to you. Don't mistake the silence for safety. This isn't peace. It's the quiet of a grave where your personality used to live. Most people believe the game ends when the manipulator walks away. Fatal error. Their physical presence is irrelevant once the code has been uploaded to your mind. This is where the external gaslighting stops and the internal auto-gaslighting begins. You pick up the weapon they dropped and point it at yourself. You meet someone new, honest, transparent, but your alarm bells ring anyway. Peace feels suspicious. Stability feels like the calm before a storm. You've been conditioned to associate chaos with connection, confusion with depth. When truth is presented plainly, you reject it because it lacks the jagged edge you've grown accustomed to. Lies feel comfortable because they're familiar. Truth feels foreign because it's threatening. You're walking through the world with a compass that points south. You retreat into isolation, not because the world is attacking you, but because you can no longer distinguish a handshake from a trap. But here's the strategic pivot. You have to treat this not as an emotional wound, but as a structural failure in your logic center. You need to rebuild how you know what's true. And the mechanism to do that starts with a refusal to engage. You're currently trapped in a loop of defending the truth, thinking if you just explain it clearly enough, they'll finally admit what happened. That belief is the trap. The debate itself is the weapon. By participating, you validate their premise that truth is subjective, that your reality is up for negotiation. It's not. You must execute radical validation. You become the final authority on your own perception. You stop asking for permission to believe your own senses. Externalize your memory. Under gaslighting pressure, internal recall becomes fluid. It bends. So create an external hard drive that can't be manipulated. Write it down. Document every contradiction. Record the exact words used against you. When you rely on your mind, you're fighting on their turf. When you rely on a written record, you're fighting on yours. There's a reason tyrants burn books first. The written record is the enemy of the lie. Be the one who keeps the books. Once you have the record, re-establish boundaries. Draw a line between open discussion and objective fact. Don't explain this boundary, enforce it. When they cross it, the conversation ends. Not with a shout, with silence. And this is the ultimate liberation. The manipulator holds power only because you crave their agreement. You want them to say, "Yes, I did that." You're starving for their validation. Stop eating the poison. The moment you stop needing the manipulator to agree with your reality, their power evaporates. They're left screaming at a wall while you walk through the door. You strip them of their significance. You turn a monster into a nuisance. We've dissected the machinery of this invisible weapon, stripped it to the bolts, the erosion, the isolation, the public theater, the dependency shift, the intelligence trap. Now here's the final truth. The manipulator is weak. This entire time, you thought they were the grand strategist, that they held all the cards. But gaslighting relies entirely on your cooperation. It's a parasite that requires a host. Cut off the supply of self-doubt, and the parasite starves. The weapon jams. You now possess the framework to identify these patterns the moment they begin. When they rewrite your past, you'll recognize the destabilization tactic. When they try to isolate you, you'll see it for what it is. A strategic maneuver to cut your supply lines. You see the board clearly now. You know their next move before they make it. Your confusion ends today. You're no longer a participant in their play. You're the audience, and it's a bad performance. Next time they project an alternative narrative, You won't argue. You'll observe the gears turning with cold, detached curiosity. You'll watch the desperation behind their eyes as they realize the old tricks don't land anymore. You are the architect of your own reality. You decide what's true. You decide what you saw, what you heard. No one else gets a vote. That's the ultimate freedom, not the freedom to be believed. The freedom from needing to be believed by the liar. The spell is broken. The invisible chains have dissolved. You turned on the lights. Now walk forward with the quiet certainty of someone who can never be blinded again. You don't beat gaslighting by yelling louder or by perfecting your argument. Honestly, the real win comes when you stop letting them put your own perception on trial. Period. Healthy people talk about facts. Manipulators? They twist reality itself into a debate. Notice the difference. From now on, don't get caught up in their words. Watch the pattern. If they're always rewriting your past, labeling your feelings as wrong, or making you second-guess your memory, that's not a simple mix-up. It's slow erosion. And here's the thing. Erosion only eats away at you if you let it. You don't owe anyone proof of what you saw. What matters is deciding what you'll tolerate. Clarity doesn't shout. It's quiet. Truth never needs to argue. And the moment you trust your gut without needing their okay, everything shifts. Not because they suddenly got better, because you did.